It's connected with almost everything we talk about, leadership. So, yes, that's what we start off with today on Sunrise Daily. And we're joined by Mr. Adetokunbo Bayo, who is a leadership consultant. Morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Always a pleasure.
You know, time and again we talk about this, and sometimes one wonders, what kind of results do we expect to see when, at different levels now, when we talk about leadership? Because some people just think, well, no, I don't know, I'm just here to do what I have to do. I'm elected afterwards. This is what they want. And people have got different perspectives, different mindsets about what leadership really is. Yeah. Some think it's only when I'm in front that I can lead. I can't lead from behind. I can't lead within the crowd. Is that the case?
No, not really. In fact, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have in the Nigerian environment. That as a people, I have been into leadership consulting and training for quite a few years. And one of the things that you find out as you work with different organizations at different levels is that there is a challenge of perspective. If you don't know what something is, as I think was Miles Monroe said, you're likely to abuse it. And one of the biggest challenges there is that there is a mixture between the position and the action. Whether the leader is the man who has a position or the leader is the man who is known by his action. I was reading somewhere somebody said, and I found that an interesting analogy. He said, the inverse of leadership is followership. And the person said, a leader is therefore somebody whom the people will follow, regardless of whether the person has an office or not. And that separation and understanding helps a man decide whether he's working in leadership, and also allows us to be able to assess whether we do have a leadership issue. Because one of the biggest challenges you have across Nigeria, whether it's in government or you'll be amazed, even in the private sector, is that there is a gap in people's perspective and understanding of who a leader is and what leadership is about. And because of that, in fact, most Nigerians personally think that leadership is position. So when you hear Nigerians complain about leadership, first of all, you automatically get that they are complaining about the president or about the governor or about the local government chairman, and really about even themselves in their families and the way they affect the environment in which they are. Because the reality of life is that everyone affects his environment one way or the other. Earlier on I was listening to Mark talking about the pipeline vandalizers and talking about the policemen who are involved in it, the security people. And they don't realize that they are delivering leadership of some sort. The leadership they are delivering is that they are saying to the people that they are operating around that it's all right as long as Oga policeman is behind you. You can go and vandalize that pipeline. The area commander who overlooks it is saying to his people, it's all right. And unconsciously, it begins to cascade down the line. And by the time you get the result, which is one of the problems you have with multiplier effect, is that it may be far out of proportion to what you started out to do.
You know, some also ask, because just as we say, it's from different perspectives to all of this. And I heard people say, well, after all, what's in this for me? Why should I provide leadership? They owe me nothing. I owe them nothing. So I might as well just do what I have to do and move on.
And that is true. In fact, that's one of the biggest drives in Nigeria. A man gets into office, and once you, in Nigeria, when a man is made governor or commissioner, his family goes and does Thanksgiving because their brother has arrived. And they send a delegation from the village to thank the governor for appointing their brother. And the idea is that it's now our turn. But you see, I was sharing with someone the other day, and I said, the biggest challenge you have in our environment is our inability to see a distant future. To recognize that, let me give an example. They put you in office, and you steal enough money, and you buy a jeep, but you don't fix the road. You come out of office, however much the money you've stolen, it's going to go down. Money does not keep itself. Your jeep is going to drive on the bad road, which is going to further deteriorate because you didn't fix it. In 10 years' time, your jeep will be a broken down vehicle. And you would not be able to walk on your road to your house.
Consequently, do you even look at 10 years' time?
That's the challenge. I developed a concept several years ago which I called locus of focus. That is, one of the biggest reasons why people do what they do is an inability to look into the distant future. Research was done a few years ago, and research indicated, and it was a sad research, it indicated that among the people in the world, the West Africans, and I would say we are 70% of West Africa, the West Africans have the lowest long-term orientation in the world.
Wow.
And that's a sad thing. And the reason is because we don't think of the future. Think of a father who goes and pays somebody to write exam for his child because he's got the money today. In 20, 30 years' time, the father is a dead man. His son cannot read and write. Has he helped the child or has he destroyed the child? Or the father who goes and bribes somebody for his child to get a particular class of degree. And then the child goes abroad and he carries this first class, he brands around the place. When they ask him questions at the interview, and I've seen that happen, he looks at you like he's an idiot. At the end of the day, he walks into situations where he has no capacity to defend himself. And if anything should happen to that father, dies on a road accident tomorrow, his son is helpless.
Because that's a bad leader that has just created
a problem.
A problem.
He has just created a problem. And the reason he's creating this problem is that he has an innate inability to try and ask himself, what is the long-term implication? In fact, if I was to address one of the fundamental challenges we have in leadership in the environment, I would say it's the vision question. It's the inability to see that what I do today has a long-term effect on what will happen tomorrow. I mean, you see, I was talking to somebody once, he was celebrating the fact that my wife had the positions she held. And at the same time, he was desiring his wife would have those kind of things. But at the same time, when his wife doesn't deliver him his dinner at 6 p.m. or his breakfast at 7:30 a.m., all hell breaks loose in the house. So his dinner and his breakfast become her number one priority. And because it's an only priority, she's unable to do the other things that he would like her to become. So he ends up, what does he end up doing? He ends up celebrating somebody else's wife, not his own wife, and desirous that his own wife will get there. So actually, ultimately, the ultimate fact is that every act of leadership has effects in our lives. Look at Mandela, for example, today. The man fell ill a little bit. The whole world gathers around his table. I told someone the other day he's 94. It's a matter of fact, he's outlived people that didn't go to prison for 20 years. He's still there, but all of us are hanging around on every drop. If his blood temperature should go down, everybody says Mandela's blood temperature has gone down. Why? Because in taking on a risk to affect his nation, he's become a celebrity. We don't hear of him as having money.
Such risk, are they the same that you would want to call sacrifices?
Yes, I would say a sacrifice, basically. But it's a sacrifice driven by a long-term vision. I mean, I remember reading A Long Walk to Freedom, Mandela's book, and reading the fact that in 1957, as president of the African National Congress Youth Forum, he addressed the Congress and he said, I see a free South Africa in my lifetime where blacks and whites are equal. And I see myself leading that free South Africa. He went to prison 6 years later. He stayed there for 27 years. But it still came to pass, ultimately. And that's why he's idolized. So the issue is sacrifices. I tell you this. One of the reasons why people don't make sacrifices is because they don't understand the context. They make you president of Nigeria, for example. I remember I was on channels once and I was talking about the late President Yaradua, if you remember. And we were talking about the fact that ill health, some people said ill health was his biggest challenge. And I said, you only get to be president of this country once. And if I was president, if I needed to carry a ventilator and put it next door, and every few minutes go and get ventilated, but get the work going, so that my track record, we're talking about men like Abraham Lincoln, years later. We're talking about men like George Washington. We're talking about men like Winston Churchill, centuries later. We're even talking about men in Nigeria like Zik and Awolowo. And each of them paid certain prices at different times. But the reason they could pay those prices is because they were aware that the actions they take have long-term significance, and they could set a picture of where they wanted their people to be in the long term.